President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris meeting separately with the Israeli Prime Minister as the White House says a ceasefire deal could be coming. The administration also strongly condemning pro-Hamas protests that turned violent in the nation's capital. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. So what can you tell us? What is President Biden and Netanyahu discussing today?
Good evening to you, Steve. The White House says a top agenda for President Biden's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today was to discuss how to close the remaining gaps in reaching a ceasefire deal in Gaza and get the hostages back home. The meeting comes a day after President Biden, during his Oval Office address to the nation, said that ending the war in Gaza remains a top priority in his remaining months as the president. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu today thanking President Biden for supporting Israel for the past 5 decades. Watch.
Well, welcome back, Mr. Prime Minister. We got a lot to talk about.
Mr. President, we've known each other for 40 years. I want to thank you for 50 years of public service and 50 years of support for the State of Israel.
The White House today also pushed back against speculation that President Biden dropping out of the 2024 race would affect the progress with ceasefire negotiations. Instead, the White House says a deal is coming close. The White House also condemned pro-Hamas protesters in Washington, D.C., who during Netanyahu's visit on Wednesday burned down an American flag, replaced it with Palestinian flags, and sprayed graffiti reading "Hamas is coming." Here's White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby. Watch.
We know that there are strong views, and when you burn an American flag and pull it down off a U.S. government site, that's just absolutely unacceptable.
And Vice President Kamala Harris, who is meeting separately with Netanyahu today, also strongly condemned these protests. She wrote in her statement that these actions are, quote, despicable acts by unpatriotic protesters and dangerous hate-fueled rhetoric. Harris added in her statement that the American flag should, quote, never be desecrated in that way. And last night, a group of lawmakers put the American flag back up at the same spot. Here's Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, speaking right after that. Watch.
Flew Palestinian flags on these poles today. It was outrageous. They were pulled down, thankfully. But the American flags have not been put back up.
And former President Trump said today in an interview that Israel needs to do better with its public relations. He's meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow at Mar-a-Lago. Back to you, Steve.
Certainly a lot going on, Iris. And as Vice President Kamala Harris kicks off her campaign, what is the latest between her and former President Trump?
So Vice President Kamala Harris today told reporters that she is, quote, ready to debate Trump, adding that she has already agreed to a September 10th debate hosted by ABC. We know that former President Trump said this week that he absolutely wants to debate Harris and that he would like to debate her more than just one time. So a lot to look for in the coming weeks and months. Back to you.
NTD's Iris Tao from the White House. Excellent reporting. Thank you, Iris. And the House of Representatives has passed a resolution condemning Vice President Kamala Harris's handling of the border crisis. This as most Democrats rally behind their new presumptive nominee. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more from Capitol Hill.
6 Democrats voted with Republicans to condemn Vice President Kamala Harris for her handling of the border crisis. The resolution refers to President Joe Biden's decision back in 2021 to select Vice President Harris to lead the administration's border policies. The resolution also refers to Vice President Harris as the border czar.
There is no such thing as a border czar, and it's just continuing to use the official authority and official resources of Congress for partisan political electoral purposes.
Democratic lawmakers praised the Biden-Harris administration. For example, Congressman Maxwell Frost, a Democrat from Florida, compared President Joe Biden's address to the nation Thursday night, where he explained his reasoning for not seeking re-election, to George Washington.
One of the reasons that we look to and admire George Washington so much is because he knew when the time was to pass along power, to step down. President Biden has cemented his legacy in a very similar way. One of the most effective presidencies in the history of our country, the most progressive president in the history of our country, and now someone who has made this hard decision to pass the torch. I think history will remember this kindly.
After votes this Thursday, Congress will not reconvene until mid-September when Congress is back in session. They will have 2 weeks to pass the remaining appropriation bills to fund government through fiscal year 2025. something some Republicans believe is highly unlikely.
No, absolutely, it was not good. You know, Kevin McCarthy got 7 of the 12 passed before he was wrongfully ousted, and then now Mike Johnson has gotten 5. They're probably going to be forcing us to vote on a CR.
House Republicans have passed 5 out of the 12 appropriation bills thus far, all 5 on party lines. Those 5 bills represent approximately 75% of government spending for fiscal year 2025. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Congress is leaving early for their August recess amid a stalemate over funding. This highlighting how a slim majority in a highly partisan environment can actually slow down legislative action. NTD's Melina Wisecup explains how the current power balance creates challenges for important deadlines this fall.
When House Speaker Mike Johnson assumed leadership, his #1 goal was to end the vicious cycle of failing to meet the regular September 30th deadline to fund the government. But that objective may be out of reach as disputes within the Republican Party have forced leadership to delay votes on a handful of bills. Those votes are now punted into September, when Republicans' slim majority is expected to get even slimmer. The current party breakdown in the House is 220 Republicans to 212 Democrats with 3 vacancies, meaning Republicans can afford to lose only 3 votes on any bill. And House members are using this vulnerability as leverage to alter spending bills. This on full display this week when Speaker Mike Johnson was forced to pull 3 bills from the floor due to Republican disputes over sensitive issues like abortion policy. And it's not likely to get easier when lawmakers return in September. Right as the government funding deadline approaches, Democrats will likely gain another seat by filling the vacancy left by late Congressman Donald Payne Jr. This would leave the balance of power at 220 to 213. As for the other 2 vacancies, they're expected to be filled in November. One is from the recent death of longtime Democrat Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. The other vacancy is from the resignation of Congressman Mike Gallagher. He's the latest of 5 Republicans to resign during this Congress, forcing Republicans to work hard just to keep their heads above water. 2 seats that Republicans lost this session, Democrats gained in New York. As for what all of this means heading into November, well, for Democrats to take back the gavel in the House, they'll need either a net gain of 4 or 5 seats, depending on how that special election turns out. Whereas over in the Senate, Republicans have the upper hand based on the sheer numbers alone, since they have fewer seats up for grabs this cycle. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.